My daughter-in-law arrived trembling and handed me a USB saying, "If anything happens to me, open it." 3 days later, she disappeared. When I saw the content, I was paralyzed. I wished I had never opened those files. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The afternoon light filtered through my kitchen curtains in that particular way it does in late October, golden and waning, as if the day itself knows it's running out of time. I was arranging chrysanthemums in a vase, the kind of mundane task that fills the hours of a 64-year-old widow living alone in a farmhouse outside Madison, Wisconsin. My hands, weathered but steady, worked the stems into place with the practiced ease of someone who's spent a lifetime making things presentable. That's when I heard the car. Not the usual rumble of my son David's truck, or the purr of my daughter Linda's sedan. This was desperate. Tires spitting gravel, an engine pushed too hard. I set down the scissors and moved to the window, my heart already beginning its warning knock against my ribs. The car was Helen's, my daughter-in-law, David's wife of 7 years. But Helen never drove like that. Helen was careful, measured, the kind of woman who checked her mirrors twice and signaled even on empty country roads. I was at the door before she reached it. Margaret. My name came out of her like a prayer, breathy and fractured. Her face was pale, almost gray, and her hands shook so violently that she had to clutch them together to still them. Dark circles hollowed her eyes, and her blonde hair, usually styled with precision, hung limp and unwashed. "Helen, dear God, what's happened?" I pulled her inside, felt how cold she was despite the warm autumn day. "Come sit down. Let me get you—" "No." She grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. "No, I can't stay. He'll know I came here. They'll all know." "Who will know?" "David." "Honey, you're not making sense." Her eyes darted to the window, then back to me. In 17 years of knowing Helen Brighton, now Helen Thornton, I had never seen fear like this. Not nervousness, not worry. Raw, animal fear. She fumbled in her purse with trembling fingers and produced a small black USB drive, the kind you can buy at any office supply store for $5. Unremarkable. Ordinary. She pressed it into my palm and closed my fingers around it, holding my hand between both of hers. "If anything happens to me," she whispered, "open it. Watch everything. Don't tell anyone you have it. Not David, not Linda, not anyone. Helen, you're scaring me. What's on this?" "The truth." Her laugh was hollow, broken. "The truth about all of them. About what they've been doing. What your family has been doing." The words hung in the air like smoke. My family. The way she said it, excluding herself, as if she'd discovered she'd married into something foreign and dangerous. "I don't understand. What are you talking about?" She glanced at the window again. I thought I was going crazy at first. Little things that didn't add up. Money appearing and disappearing. David taking calls in the middle of the night and telling me it was work. Your daughter Linda showing up at our house at odd hours. Then I found— She stopped herself. "It's all on there. Recordings, documents. I've been collecting evidence for 6 months. Evidence of what? I can't. If I tell you and something happens, they'll know I told you. They'll know you didn't just find out on your own." Her eyes filled with tears. "Margaret, I'm so sorry. I know you'll hate me for this. I know you'll think I'm crazy or lying or trying to break up your family. But I swear to you, everything on that drive is real." My mind struggled to catch up. Evidence. Recordings. My children involved in something that had reduced this composed, rational woman to a trembling wreck. Are they in trouble with the law? Is it drugs? Gambling? Worse. She pulled away, wrapping her arms around herself. So much worse than that. And it's not just David and Linda. It's Dennis, too. Dennis. Linda's husband of 15 years, father of my 2 granddaughters. Helen, if my family is in some kind of danger, I need to know now. We need to call— "No police!" Her voice cracked like a whip. "That's what I'm trying to tell you. The police can't help. Some of them are involved. I don't know who to trust, Margaret. I don't know who's safe. That's why I came to you. You're the only one I'm sure isn't part of it. The only one not part of it." The words settled into my chest like stones. Where will you go? I have a friend's cabin upstate, somewhere they don't know about. I'm going to disappear for a few days until I figure out what to do. I needed someone to have this. Someone who would actually look at it if something happened. She moved toward the door, then turned back. Promise me you won't watch it unless something happens. I don't want you involved in this if I can still fix it. But if I can't, if they... Her voice caught. I promise. I held up the USB drive. But Helen, please don't go. Stay here. We can figure this out together. She shook her head, already backing toward the door. They know where you live. They come here all the time. It's not safe. Then let me come with you. No. You're better off not knowing where I am, for both our sakes. She paused with her hand on the doorknob. I love your son, Margaret, I really do. But I can't be part of what they're doing. And when you see what's on that drive, you'll understand why. She was gone before I could respond, the door closing with a soft click that somehow sounded louder than a slam. I stood in my hallway, still wearing my gardening apron, holding a USB drive that weighed nothing but felt heavy as lead. Through the window, I watched her car tear back down the gravel drive, leaving a cloud of dust that hung in the golden light like a ghost. I looked down at the black plastic rectangle in my palm. So small, so ordinary. Containing what? Evidence of what? My mind spun through possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. Had David gotten involved in something criminal? Was Linda having an affair? Was Dennis embezzling from his accounting firm? Or was it, as Helen had said, worse than any of that? I should have watched it immediately. Any reasonable person would have. But I'm Margaret Thornton, sensible, practical, a woman who raised 2 children on her own after my husband Bill died of a heart attack at 49. A woman who doesn't panic, who thinks before she acts, who respects promises. I had promised not to watch unless something happened to Helen. So instead, I did what any sensible person would do. I hid it. Not in an obvious place. Not in my jewelry box or desk drawer. I went upstairs to my bedroom, to the walk-in closet that still held some of Bill's old clothes. On the top shelf, behind a stack of sweaters I never wore, was a shoebox containing letters Bill had written me during our courtship. I tucked the USB drive into the bottom of that box, beneath 40 years of faded love letters written in Bill's careful hand. My children had no reason to look there. No one did. Then I went back downstairs and finished arranging my chrysanthemums, hand shaking only slightly, as if my world hadn't just tilted on its axis. That was Monday, October 23rd, at 3:47 in the afternoon. Helen disappeared 3 days later. Not gradually, not in the way people slowly drift out of your life. She vanished completely, as if she'd never existed at all. David called me Thursday evening, his voice tight with controlled panic. Mom, have you heard from Helen? Not since Monday. Why? She's not answering her phone. She didn't show up to work. Her boss called me. A pause, heavy with something unspoken. When you saw her Monday, did she seem okay? She seemed upset, I said carefully. She didn't stay long. Upset about what? She didn't say. I assumed you two had an argument. Another pause. Yeah, we did. About her mother visiting. Nothing serious. He was lying. I knew my son's voice. Knew the pitch it took when he was concealing something. I'd heard it when he was 12 and broke my good china, when he was 16 and came home drunk, when he was 23 and quit his engineering program without telling me until after the withdrawal deadline. I'm sure she'll turn up, I said. Maybe she needed some space. Yeah, maybe. But he didn't sound convinced. If she contacts you, will you let me know immediately? Of course. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen as the October darkness pressed against the windows. The USB drive upstairs suddenly felt like it was burning through the ceiling, through the floor, demanding attention. If anything happens to me, Helen had said. I told myself that her not answering her phone didn't constitute something happening. People went off-grid all the time. She'd said she was going to a friend's cabin. She was probably there, safe, gathering her thoughts and evidence, preparing to what? Confront David? Go to the authorities? I would wait. I would be sensible. But by Friday afternoon, when both David and Linda came to my house, together, which was unusual, I knew something had shifted. They stood in my living room with a unified front that reminded me uncomfortably of when they were teenagers, covering for each other's misdeeds. Linda wore her realtor's smile, professional and empty. David had his hands in his pockets, trying too hard to appear casual. "Mom," Linda began, "we need to talk to you about Helen. Has something happened? Has she been found?" "No, that's just it." Linda exchanged a glance with her brother. "David filed a missing persons report this morning. The police are getting involved." "Isn't that good? Won't they help find her?" "The thing is," David said, "Helen's been acting strange lately. Really strange. Dennis noticed it too. She'd been asking weird questions about the business, about our finances. We think she might have been having some kind of breakdown." I kept my face neutral, my voice mild. "What kind of breakdown?" "Paranoid delusions," Linda said. "Imagining things that weren't real. Accusing David of things that make no sense. We're worried she might hurt herself. Or worse." "Worse? That she might try to hurt our family in some way," David said quietly. "If she contacts you, Mom, you need to tell us immediately. And you need to be careful what you believe. She's not well. She hasn't been well for a while." They were rewriting the narrative before Helen's story could be told, preemptively discrediting her, making her crazy, unstable, dangerous, making anything she might have said to me sound like the ravings of a disturbed mind. "Of course," I heard myself say. "If she contacts me, I'll let you know right away." Another lie. Another promise broken. After they left, I sat in the gathering dusk and felt the architecture of my comfortable life beginning to crack. My children, the babies I'd nursed and raised and sacrificed for, were lying to me. And somewhere, Helen was either hiding or couldn't hide anymore. That night, I dreamed of USB drives multiplying like cancer cells, filling my house, each one containing secrets that would destroy everything I thought I knew. I woke at 3 a.m., my heart hammering. The sensible thing would be to give the drive to the police. Let them sort it out. Let the authorities handle whatever Helen had discovered. But Helen had said some of them were involved. Some of the police. And my children had looked at me with faces I didn't recognize, telling me stories that tasted like poison. I lay in the dark, listening to the old farmhouse settle around me, and made my decision. At dawn, I would watch what was on that drive. And then I would know the truth about my family, whatever that truth turned out to be. Saturday morning arrived with fog so thick I could barely see the oak tree at the edge of my property. Appropriate, I thought, for what I was about to do. Step into a fog of secrets that might never lift. I made coffee first, strong and black. Then I retrieved the USB drive from its hiding place, my fingers brushing against Bill's old letters. "I'm sorry," I whispered to his memory, though I wasn't sure what I was apologizing for. For doubting our children? For what I might discover? My laptop sat on the kitchen table, 4 years old and slow to boot up. I'd bought it after Bill died, taught myself email and online banking with the determined patience of someone who refused to become irrelevant. Now I plugged in the drive with hands that had steadied overnight. Whatever was coming, I would face it clearly. The drive contained a single folder labeled Evidence. Inside were 63 files. Video recordings, audio files, scanned documents and photographs, all meticulously dated and labeled. Helen had been thorough. I started with the oldest file, dated April 15th, 6 months ago. The video opened on Helen's face, filmed close up in what looked like her car. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were frightened. "My name is Helen Thornton. Today is April 15th. This is the first recording. If anyone is watching this, it means something has happened to me. Everything I'm documenting is real. I'm not crazy, though I'm sure by now they've told you I am." She took a breath, glanced at something off camera. 3 weeks ago, I found something in David's truck. A burner phone. He doesn't know I found it because I put it back exactly where it was, but I took photos of every message on it first. My chest tightened. David with a secret phone. Helen continued. "The messages were mostly in code, but some were clear enough. They're running some kind of operation. David, Linda, Dennis, maybe others. Something about packages, deliveries, routes. At first, I thought drugs, but the amounts of money they mentioned. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the locations they referenced. She paused. They're using Margaret's farm. The words hit me like a physical blow. My farm. This house where I'd raised my children, where Bill and I had built our life. I don't know what for yet, Helen said. But they meet there when they think Margaret is away. I followed David last Thursday when he told me he had to check on his mother. She wasn't even home. I called her myself to verify. But he went to the farm anyway, and Linda and Dennis met him there. They were in the old barn for 2 hours. The old barn. We hadn't used it for livestock in 15 years. Not since I'd sold off the last of Bill's cattle after his death. It was just storage now. Old equipment, forgotten furniture, boxes of junk I kept meaning to sort through. Or so I'd thought. I paused the video, my mind reeling. Then I clicked on the next file, a photograph taken from a distance, zoomed in but still clear. My barn door open, David's truck parked beside it, Linda's sedan, Dennis's SUV. The timestamp showed 11:47 p.m. on April 20th. They'd been there near midnight, when I'd been safely asleep in my bed, trusting my children, never imagining they were using my property for what? I forced myself to continue through the files. More videos of Helen documenting her findings. Audio recordings of conversations she'd captured. Her phone hidden in David's truck, picking up fragments of telephone conversations. The shipment arrives Tuesday. Tell the contact in Milwaukee the route is clear. We need to move the inventory before Margaret decides to clean out that barn. My name, spoken in David's voice with casual calculation. They were actively monitoring my movements, my plans, ensuring I wouldn't stumble onto whatever they were hiding. Then I reached a video dated September 3rd, and everything crystallized into sharp, horrible focus. This footage wasn't from Helen's phone. It was from a camera she must have hidden. The angle was fixed, high up, looking down into the barn's interior. The quality was grainy, shot in low light, but clear enough. I watched my son David carry boxes into the barn. Not boxes, shipping containers, the kind used for international freight. Linda was with him, directing where to stack them. Dennis used a crowbar to pry one open. Even through the poor video quality, I could see what was inside. Electronics, hundreds of them. Laptops, tablets, smartphones, still in their factory packaging but with the labels torn off or obscured. Stolen goods, I whispered to my empty kitchen, but it was worse than simple theft. In the next video, dated September 10th, I watched Dennis photograph the contents of several opened boxes, creating detailed inventories. Then Linda pulled out what looked like new documentation, shipping manifests, customs forms, and began attaching them to the containers. They were smuggling, taking stolen electronics, creating false documentation, and moving them through what I could only assume were illegal channels. Using my barn as their storage facility, their distribution point. My children were criminals. I sat back from the laptop, the coffee turning cold in my cup. The morning sun had burned off the fog, and through my kitchen window, I could see the barn clearly. That innocuous old building, weathered red paint and sagging roof, was being used to commit federal crimes. And I'd had no idea. The next video file was labeled October 12th Confrontation. I almost didn't want to play it, but I'd come this far. This time the video showed Helen sitting in her car, parked on a residential street I didn't recognize. Her hands gripped the steering wheel and her voice was shaking. I confronted David last night. I told him I knew what he was doing. I didn't tell him about the recordings. I said I'd followed him to Margaret's farm and saw enough to piece it together. She laughed, a broken sound. He didn't deny it. He didn't even try. She wiped her eyes. He said I didn't understand, that they'd had no choice, that after Bill died and Margaret was struggling with medical bills and the farm expenses, Linda came up with the idea. Just one shipment, Linda said, just enough to help their mother keep her home. But one became two, and two became regular, and now they're in so deep they can't get out. Medical bills, farm expenses, my struggles after Bill died. They'd done this for me? No. I rejected that immediately. Bill's medical bills had been paid years ago. The farm was paid off. I lived modestly but comfortably on his life insurance and my retirement from teaching. I'd never asked my children for money, never told them I was struggling because I wasn't. They were using me, my finances, my supposed vulnerability, as an excuse for their own greed. Helen's voice continued. David said if I went to the police, I'd destroy the whole family. Margaret would lose everything. The house would be seized, her reputation destroyed. She'd be implicated whether she knew or not because it's her property. He said I needed to think about what it would do to her, to live her final years knowing her children were in prison because of her farm. Emotional blackmail. Using my well-being as a weapon against his own wife. But that's not even the worst part, Helen said, and now tears ran freely down her face. He said there were people involved, dangerous people, who wouldn't let me just walk away with what I know. He said if I threatened to expose the operation, I'd be putting myself at risk, that these people don't leave loose ends. The video ended there. I sat in my kitchen, surrounded by cheerful yellow walls I'd painted 5 years ago, sunlight streaming through windows onto surfaces I polished weekly, and felt like I was inhabiting a stage set. Nothing was real. Nothing was what it seemed. The doorbell rang. I jumped so violently I nearly knocked over my cold coffee. My heart hammered as I quickly closed the laptop and shoved it into a drawer, the USB drive still connected. Through the front door's side window, I could see Sheriff Tom Hendricks on my porch. Tom had been a friend of Bill's, had known our family for 25 years. He'd helped me with property disputes, had recommended contractors when I needed repairs. I'd always felt safe knowing Tom was looking out for the community. Now, as I opened the door, Helen's words echoed in my mind. Some of them are involved. Some of the police. Morning, Margaret. Tom's smile was warm, familiar. He held his hat in his hands, the picture of respectful concern. Got a minute to talk? Of course, Tom. Come in. He settled into my living room armchair, the one Bill used to favor. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. This man in my dead husband's place, about to ask questions I couldn't answer honestly. I'm here about Helen Thornton, he said. Your daughter-in-law. I understand she came to see you last Monday. She did. Just briefly. How did she seem to you? I chose my words carefully. Upset, anxious. She didn't stay long. Did she say anything unusual? Mention where she might be going? She mentioned an argument with David about her mother visiting. Nothing more specific than that. Tom nodded, making notes in a small notepad. Here's the thing, Margaret. We've been looking into Helen's recent behavior, and we're finding some concerning patterns. Bank accounts she'd hidden from David, large cash withdrawals, internet searches about how to disappear, how to create false identities. I kept my expression neutral, concerned, but not suspicious. That does sound worrying. We're also finding evidence she may have been suffering from paranoid delusions. She'd been recording people without their knowledge, taking photographs of family members in ways that suggest surveillance. David found a camera hidden in their bedroom, Margaret, his own bedroom. He leaned forward, his voice gentle. I know this is hard to hear, but we're starting to think Helen might have been planning something that could have put your family at risk. If she told you anything at all, that might help us find her before she hurts herself or someone else, you need to tell me now. The concern in his voice sounded genuine. But Helen had recorded evidence of crimes happening on my property, and now the sheriff was sitting in my living room, suggesting that Helen was dangerous, unstable, someone who needed to be found. For her own safety, his tone suggested. But I heard the subtext. Someone who needed to be silenced. I wish I could help, I said. But she really didn't tell me anything specific. She seemed upset, and now I understand why if she was struggling with mental health issues. I just hope she's safe, wherever she is. Tom studied my face for a long moment. Then he smiled and stood. Well, if you think of anything, or if she contacts you, call me directly. Not the station. Call my personal cell. Here. He handed me a card with a number written on the back in pen. Day or night, Margaret. This is important. Of course. I walked him to the door, waited until his patrol car disappeared down my drive. Then I locked the door, drew the curtains, and returned to my kitchen with shaking hands. Tom Hendricks was involved. Whether actively participating or just covering for my children, he was part of this. I pulled the laptop back out and continued through Helen's files. The next document was a scanned photocopy of what looked like accounting records. Dennis's handwriting. I recognized it from birthday cards and Christmas letters. Columns of figures, dates, locations. And at the top, 3 initials. T.H. Tom Hendricks. He wasn't just covering for them. He was being paid. The scope of what my family had done was expanding with every file I opened. This wasn't 3 people making one bad decision. This was an organized operation with multiple participants, reaching into law enforcement, operating for years. And I was sitting at the center of it, in a house they'd used as their base of operations, completely unaware. The phone rang. I let it go to voicemail. Linda's voice. "Mom, just checking in. Call me when you get a chance. Love you. Love you." The words meant nothing now, or meant something so twisted I couldn't comprehend it. A love that would use me, deceive me, put me at risk of criminal prosecution to protect their operation. I had a choice to make. Give the evidence to authorities outside this county, outside Tom Hendricks's reach. Expose my children and watch them face justice. Clear my own name, but destroy my family. Or stay silent. Pretend I didn't know. Let them continue using my property for crimes I was now aware of, making me complicit. Or find another way. I was 64 years old, a widow, a retired teacher. My children thought I was harmless, easy to manipulate, too trusting to notice what was happening under my own roof. They'd forgotten that I'd raised them, that I'd navigated every tantrum, every lie, every scheme they'd ever concocted, that I'd taught middle school for 30 years and could spot deception from across a classroom. They'd underestimated me, and that, I realized as I scrolled through Helen's carefully documented evidence, was going to be their biggest mistake. The phone rang again. David this time. I answered, keeping my voice normal, concerned, motherly. "Hello, sweetheart." "Mom, I need to ask you something directly. When Helen came to see you Monday, did she give you anything? Any papers? Any computer drives? Anything at all?" "No, dear. Why would she? The police think she might have been collecting documents, trying to build some kind of case against me for domestic abuse or something. Completely fabricated. But she might have convinced herself it was real." His voice was earnest, worried. "If she gave you anything like that, you need to turn it over to Sheriff Hendricks immediately. For her sake, Mom, so we can get her the mental help she needs." "I understand," I said. "But she didn't give me anything. I'm sorry I can't help more." After he hung up, I sat holding the phone and marveled at how smoothly he'd lied, how easily the fiction rolled off his tongue, how convinced he seemed that I believed him. They thought they'd controlled the narrative, thought they'd isolated Helen, discredited her, and ensured that anything she might have revealed would be dismissed as delusions. They didn't know she'd given me 6 months of evidence, and they didn't know that I'd already begun to plan. Outside my window, the barn stood innocent and empty-looking in the autumn sunlight. But I knew better now, and knowledge, I'd learned in 64 years of living, was its own kind of power. I spent the rest of Saturday studying Helen's files like they were scripture. Every document, every recording, every photograph. By nightfall, I'd filled a notebook with names, dates, amounts. The scope of the operation was staggering. It wasn't just stolen electronics. That was only one revenue stream. Helen had documented 3 separate criminal enterprises, all operating through my property. The electronic smuggling, a money laundering scheme running through Dennis's accounting firm, and, this one made my blood run cold, a storage operation for prescription medications being diverted from legitimate supply chains. Opioids, fentanyl, medications that killed people. My barn wasn't just storing stolen laptops. It was a distribution point for drugs that destroyed families, that left children orphaned, that filled coffins, and my children were profiting from it. The documentation showed deposits into offshore accounts. Dennis had been clever, layering the money through multiple shell corporations, but Helen had tracked it all, matching dates of barn activity with financial transactions, building an irrefutable pattern. The most recent entry was dated October 20th, just 3 days before Helen came to me. A shipment worth an estimated $340,000 in street value had moved through my barn. David had personally transported it to a location in Milwaukee. I thought about my son loading boxes of pills, knowing what they'd do to the people who bought them. I thought about Linda, my pragmatic daughter, helping to create false documentation that would get those drugs past inspection. I thought about Dennis, the quiet accountant I'd welcomed into my family 15 years ago, orchestrating the financial side of death. Who were these people? Because they weren't the children I'd raised. Or maybe, and this thought was worse, they were exactly the children I'd raised, and I'd simply never seen them clearly. Sunday morning, Linda came to visit. She brought fresh muffins from the bakery in town and wore her brightest smile. We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd watched Helen's videos 12 hours earlier. And my daughter chatted about her real estate sales, about my granddaughter's school activities, about plans for Thanksgiving. We were thinking we'd host this year, she said, spreading butter on a blueberry muffin. Give you a break from cooking. You've done it every year since Dad died. It's our turn. That's thoughtful, I said, pouring tea. But I enjoy hosting. It gives me something to do. Mom, you do so much already. Maintaining this whole property by yourself, it's too much. Dennis and I have been talking. Maybe it's time to consider selling. We could help you find a nice condo in town, something manageable. You'd be closer to us, to the grandkids. There it was, disguised as concern, wrapped in the language of love. They wanted me off the property. I'm not ready to sell, I said mildly. This is my home. I know. But be practical. The roof needs replacing. The barn is falling apart. The heating system is ancient. She reached across the table, squeezed my hand. We just want what's best for you. What's best for you. The ultimate manipulation, the phrase that had justified every decision they'd made on my behalf without consulting me. What's best for you meant what was convenient for them, what allowed them to continue their operations without interference. I appreciate your concern, I said, but I'm perfectly capable of maintaining my own home. Something flickered across Linda's face. Annoyance, maybe? Or calculation. Then the smile returned. Of course you are. I just worry. We all do. After she left, I stood at the window watching her car disappear and felt something harden in my chest. They were closing in, applying pressure, trying to move me off the property before I discovered what they'd been doing. Too late for that. But they didn't know I knew. That was my advantage. I spent Sunday afternoon doing something I should have done years ago, exploring my own barn thoroughly. I hadn't been inside in months, maybe longer. What was the point? Just old junk, forgotten equipment. The main floor looked exactly as I remembered. Dusty shelves, ancient farm implements, boxes of Bill's belongings I'd never sorted through. But Helen's videos had shown my children accessing a section I'd never paid attention to, a storage area at the back, behind a wall of stacked crates. It took me 20 minutes to move enough boxes to access the back wall. Behind them, I found something that definitely hadn't been there when Bill was alive. A new door, steel, with a heavy-duty lock. Someone had built an entire secure room in my barn without me knowing. I didn't have a key, but I didn't need one. Bill had taught me years ago that the trick to old barn locks was patience and the right tool. I went back to the house, found a screwdriver and hammer, and returned to work on the hinges instead of the lock. 15 minutes later, the door swung open. The room inside was climate-controlled. I could hear the hum of a generator I'd never noticed, feel the cool air. Shelves lined the walls, currently empty but clearly designed for storage. A table in the center held paperwork, shipping manifests, customs forms, all blank, ready to be filled out with false information. And in the corner, a filing cabinet. I opened it with shaking hands. The top drawer contained financial records. Dennis's handwriting, meticulous and damning. Every transaction, every shipment, every payment, all documented with an accountant's precision. Perhaps he'd kept his own records as insurance, or perhaps he was just constitutionally incapable of not tracking every dollar. The second drawer held photographs, not the kind Helen had taken from a distance. These were inside shots, my children with people I didn't recognize, loading and unloading shipments. David shaking hands with a man whose face was hard and scarred. Linda counting cash at a table, stacks of bills surrounding her. The third drawer held something that made my heart stop. Documents with my signature, bills of sale, property use agreements, storage facility rental contracts, all with my name signed at the bottom in what looked like my handwriting. They'd forged my signature. They'd created a paper trail that would make me look complicit, that would suggest I'd known about the operation all along and had been profiting from it. If this ever came to light, I wouldn't just be a victim. I'd be an accomplice. I photographed every document with my phone, hands shaking with rage. Then I carefully returned everything to its place, rehung the door, and restacked the boxes exactly as they'd been. When I got back to the house, there was a voicemail from David. "Hey, Mom, I'm going to stop by tomorrow around lunch. Need to grab some tools from the barn. You'll be home, right?" He was checking on his storage, making sure everything was secure. The casualness in his voice was maddening. Just grabbing some tools from his mother's barn? Nothing unusual. I called him back. "I'll be here. Actually, I've been thinking about what Linda said. Maybe she's right about the barn. It really is falling apart. I'm going to call some contractors this week, get estimates on either repairs or demolition." Silence on the other end. Then, demolition? Well, if it's too far gone, there's no point in repairs. Might be better to tear it down completely. Clear the space. "Mom, that's a big decision. Don't you think we should discuss it as a family first?" "It's my barn, sweetheart. My decision." More silence. I could practically hear him thinking, calculating. Right, of course. But maybe hold off on calling contractors just yet? Let me take a look first. I might be able to fix it up cheaper than you'd pay professionals. That's sweet of you. We'll talk about it tomorrow. After I hung up, I allowed myself a small smile. I'd just told them their secure storage facility might be demolished. That would force action, force mistakes. Good. Monday morning arrived with rain, the kind of cold October downpour that turns everything gray. David showed up at 11:30, earlier than he'd said, maybe hoping to catch me off guard. I was ready. I'd dressed nicely, put on makeup, made fresh coffee, the picture of a normal grandmother on a normal day. "Terrible weather," I said, taking his wet jacket. "Coffee?" "Sure." He sat at the kitchen table and I saw his eyes scanning the room, looking for what? Signs that I knew? Evidence that Helen had been here? I poured coffee, set out cookies, played my part perfectly. "So, about the barn," he said. "I really think demolition is premature. Let me get in there this week, assess what needs fixing. If you have time. I know you're so busy. I'll make time." His tone was firm. "This week, I promise." He was planning to clear out the storage room, get rid of the evidence before I accidentally discovered it. "David," I said carefully, "can I ask you something?" His shoulders tensed. "Of course. Do you think Helen is okay? Really okay? I've been so worried." Relief crossed his face. This was safe territory. "I don't know, Mom. I really don't. The things the police are finding out about her behavior, I'm starting to think I never really knew her at all." "What kind of things?" He leaned forward, his voice low and confidential. "She'd been spying on all of us. Hidden cameras, recordings. She'd broken into my truck, my phone. She'd even been following Linda and Dennis." He shook his head. "The police think she might have been trying to build some kind of conspiracy case, like she'd convinced herself we were all out to get her or something. That sounds like paranoid delusions." "Exactly. Sheriff Hendricks said it's textbook paranoid personality disorder. She'd become convinced that everyone around her was involved in some elaborate scheme. She couldn't be reasoned with, couldn't see reality." I let concern fill my face. "Do you think she might hurt someone?" "Honestly, I don't know. That's what scares me. If she's desperate, if she thinks we're all against her." He reached across the table, took my hand. "Promise me you'll be careful. If she shows up here, don't let her in. Call me immediately. I promise." He squeezed my hand, and I saw real fear in his eyes. Not fear for Helen. Fear of Helen, of what she knew, of what she might reveal. After he left for the barn, I watched from my upstairs window. He spent an hour in there. When he emerged, he made a phone call. I couldn't hear the conversation, but his body language was tense, animated. 20 minutes later, Linda and Dennis arrived. I stayed upstairs, watching. The three of them went into the barn together. They were in there for 2 hours. When they came out, they stood in the rain talking, their voices not quite carrying to where I stood behind my curtain. Whatever they'd decided, it was happening fast. That night, I received an email. The address was unfamiliar, a random string of numbers and letters at a free email service. The subject line read, "Are you safe?" The message was brief. "If you're reading this, I'm probably dead. Don't trust the police. Don't trust your children. The flash drive I gave you is only part of the evidence. I have more, stored safely. If you want it, if you're brave enough to finish what I started, reply to this email with the word lighthouse. Then wait for instructions. This email will self-delete in 24 hours. My hands trembled on the keyboard. Helen was alive. Or this was a trap. I read the message 3 more times, looking for any indication of which it might be. The paranoid part of my brain suggested my children had gained access to Helen's email, were testing to see if she'd contacted me. But the word lighthouse, that meant something. When Helen and David had gotten married, they'd honeymooned at a bed and breakfast in Door County. I'd seen the photos. Helen standing in front of a red lighthouse, laughing, her hair blowing in the wind. It was a detail my children wouldn't think was significant. It was Helen's way of proving this message was really from her. I typed one word, lighthouse, then I hit send. For 3 hours, nothing happened. I sat at my kitchen table, waiting, wondering if I'd just made a terrible mistake, if I'd just revealed to my children that their mother knew too much. Then, at 11:47 p.m., a reply arrived. Storage Unit 247, Gateway Self-Storage, Highway 51, 3 miles north of Wausau. Key is taped inside the mailbox at 1847 Riverside Drive, behind the phone book. Get the evidence. Hide it somewhere they'll never look. Then call this number. A phone number followed, then one more line. I'm sorry I got you into this, but I'm glad someone good knows the truth. Be careful. They're more dangerous than you think. S. I sat in my darkened kitchen, the only light coming from my laptop screen, and felt the weight of the decision before me. I could ignore the message, destroy the USB drive Helen had given me, pretend none of this had ever happened, or I could drive 3 hours north to Wausau, retrieve whatever evidence Helen had hidden, and commit fully to whatever path this investigation would take me down. I was 64 years old, a retired teacher, a widow, a grandmother. I should call someone, a lawyer maybe, the FBI, someone with authority and power to handle this properly. But Helen had said don't trust the police, and I'd seen Sheriff Hendricks's initials in Dennis's ledger. Who else might be involved? How deep did this corruption go? No, this had to be me. I closed the laptop, went upstairs, and packed a small overnight bag. I'd leave at dawn, tell anyone who asked that I was visiting an old teaching colleague in Wausau. A spontaneous trip. Nothing unusual. But as I lay in bed, unable to sleep, my phone buzzed with a text message. Linda. Mom, Dennis and I are worried about you being alone out there. We're thinking of moving into the guest room for a few weeks. Just until all this Helen situation gets resolved. We'll be by tomorrow with some things. Don't worry about anything. We'll take care of you. My blood ran cold. They were moving in, taking control of my house, my access, my movements, ensuring I couldn't discover what they were hiding, couldn't act on anything I might have learned. I had maybe 12 hours before they arrived and my freedom ended. I texted back, "That's so thoughtful, but completely unnecessary. I'm actually going to visit Carol in Wausau for a few days, leaving first thing in the morning. See you when I get back." Linda's response came within seconds. "Wausau, that's sudden. Why don't you wait until Wednesday and I'll drive you? Already packed. Need the break. Love you." I turned off my phone before she could respond. At 4:30 a.m., I was on the road, driving north through the darkness, with Helen's USB drive in my purse and the address of a storage unit memorized. Behind me, my home, my barn, my property, the life I'd built, sat waiting. Ahead of me lay evidence that would either save me or destroy me. And somewhere, Helen was hiding or dead, hoping I was brave enough to finish what she'd started. I pressed harder on the accelerator and drove toward the truth. The drive to Wausau took 3.5 hours through pre-dawn darkness and morning fog. I kept checking my rearview mirror, half expecting to see David's truck or Linda's sedan following me. But the highway remained empty, except for the occasional semi-truck hauling goods through the gray Wisconsin morning. I found 1847 Riverside Drive just after 8 a.m. It was a small duplex in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of anonymous rental property that nobody notices or remembers. The mailbox hung slightly crooked by the front door. I glanced around. No movement in the windows, no cars in the driveway, then reached inside. My fingers found the key exactly where Helen had said it would be, taped behind an ancient phone book someone had forgotten to throw away. Gateway Self-Storage was a sprawling facility off Highway 51, the kind with hundreds of identical orange doors stretching in neat rows. Security cameras monitored the entrance. I pulled up my jacket hood, kept my head down, and walked quickly to Unit 247. The key turned smoothly. The door rolled up with a metallic shriek that made me flinch. Inside was a single cardboard box. I pulled the door down behind me, shutting myself in darkness except for the thin strips of light filtering through the vents. My phone flashlight illuminated the space. The box was heavier than it looked. I opened it with shaking hands. More USB drives. 6 of them, each labeled with dates and locations. Financial records printed on paper, hundreds of pages, photographs, and something I hadn't expected, a handwritten journal. I opened it to a random page. Helen's neat handwriting filled the lines. August 3rd, David came home at 3 a.m., said it was a poker game, but his shoes had warehouse dust on them, the same kind I found in the barn storage room. He's lying more often now. I think he knows I'm suspicious. I have to be more careful. I flipped further back to the beginning. March 2nd. I found the first inconsistency today. David said he'd deposited his quarterly bonus, but the amount in our account was $8,000 more than his bonus should have been. When I asked, he said his company had a profit-sharing surprise, but I called HR. There was no profit sharing. Where did the extra money come from? Helen had been investigating for 8 months, not 6, longer than her digital files indicated. She'd been documenting everything: David's lies, unexplained income, suspicious behavior, building a case entry by entry. The final entry was dated October 19th, just 4 days before she'd come to my house. I confronted David tonight about the burner phone I found. He admitted everything. Not the details. He wouldn't tell me specifics, but he admitted there's an operation, that Linda and Dennis are involved, that they're using Margaret's property. He said they did it for Margaret at first, to help her keep the farm. But I checked Margaret's finances. She doesn't need help. She's comfortable. This was never about helping her. That's just their justification, their way of making themselves feel less guilty. He said if I go to the police, Margaret loses everything. The property will be seized, she'll be investigated. Her final years will be destroyed. He's using his own mother as a shield, and he doesn't even see how twisted that is. But here's what terrifies me. He said there are people involved who won't let me just walk away. He didn't elaborate, but the fear in his eyes was real. I think he's in deeper than he wants to be. I think they all are. And I think whoever is really running this operation won't hesitate to eliminate problems. I'm going to Margaret tomorrow. I trust her. She's the only one who isn't corrupted by this. If anything happens to me, she'll know what to do. She's stronger than they give her credit for. She survived losing Bill, raised 2 children alone, built a life from nothing. She won't let them get away with this. I hope I'm wrong about the danger. I hope I'm being paranoid. But if I'm not, if this journal is ever read by someone other than me, please know that I loved David. I loved him so much. I just couldn't love him more than I loved the truth. Tears blurred my vision. Helen had seen me more clearly than my own children did, had trusted me with this enormous, dangerous secret because she believed I was strong enough to handle it. And she'd been right. I couldn't break down. Not now. I carefully packed everything back into the box, added it to my trunk beneath a blanket, and drove to a cafe downtown where I could sit and think. Over coffee and a breakfast I could barely taste, I began going through the new USB drives on my laptop. The files Helen had given me at my house were incriminating. These were devastating. Video footage from inside the barn storage room, not just my children, but others. Sheriff Hendricks bringing boxes in a patrol car. A woman in a white coat I didn't recognize, counting pills into bottles. Men in suits I'd never seen, inspecting shipments. Audio recordings of conversations that made my blood run cold. David's voice. "We need to shut down operations for a few weeks. Helen knows too much." Linda responding, "We can't shut down. The next shipment is worth $500,000. We miss that, we lose the contract." A male voice I didn't recognize. "Then Helen is the problem that needs solving. Your brother knows what has to happen. He just needs to accept it." David, quiet. "She's my wife." The unknown voice, harder. "She's a liability. Handle it, or we handle it for you." The recording ended. Handle it. They were talking about killing Helen. And David, my son, who I'd raised to be kind and decent, hadn't immediately refused. He'd just reminded them she was his wife, as if that was the only reason not to murder her. I sat in that cafe, surrounded by normal people having normal Monday morning breakfasts, and realized my children were capable of things I'd never imagined. My phone buzzed. Linda calling. I didn't answer. A text followed. "Mom, where are you? You didn't really go to Wausau, did you? We drove by Carol's house. She says she hasn't heard from you in months. Call me immediately." They were tracking my lies, checking my story. Carol, my former teaching colleague, probably thought it was sweet that Linda was looking for me. Didn't understand she was being used to trap me. Another text, this time from David. "Mom, we're worried. If you're in some kind of trouble we can help. Just tell us where you are." The word trouble carried weight. It wasn't concern. It was a threat. They thought Helen had contacted me. They were trying to locate me before I could act on whatever information I had. I needed help. Real help. But who could I trust? Helen's journal had mentioned a name once. Agent Rodriguez, FBI. She'd written, "Found an FBI agent who specializes in organized crime. Agent Elena Rodriguez, Milwaukee Field Office. If I ever get brave enough, she might be who I contact, assuming she's not also compromised." It was a thin lead, but it was something. I drove to the Wausau Public Library, used their computer with my library card from back home, and searched for FBI agent Elena Rodriguez. She existed. A real agent, based in Milwaukee, with experience in organized crime and corruption cases. I created a new email address, untraceable to me. Then I composed a message. "Agent Rodriguez, my name is not important yet. I have evidence of a criminal smuggling and distribution operation running through central Wisconsin. The operation involves stolen electronics, money laundering, and pharmaceutical diversion. Local law enforcement is compromised. I have extensive documentation, videos, audio recordings, financial records spanning 8+ months. I'm willing to provide everything, but I need assurances of protection and confidentiality. If you're interested, reply to this email with the word verified. I'll know it's really you if you include the case number from the Kenosha corruption bust in 2019. I'll be in contact. A concerned citizen." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Then I sat in the library, surrounded by the dusty smell of old books and the quiet click of keyboards, and waited. 20 minutes later, a response arrived. "Concerned citizen, I'm listening. Verified. Case, sure 2019 WI 4782 CC. This is a secure line. What jurisdiction? How soon can you provide preliminary evidence? Rodriguez." She was real. She'd responded. The case number matched what I'd found in news articles about the Kenosha bust. I replied, "Dane County area. I can provide preliminary evidence within 48 hours. But first I need to secure additional materials and ensure the safety of a witness who may be in danger. Can you guarantee protective custody if needed?" Her response was immediate. "Protective custody available for credible witnesses in immediate danger. We take these matters seriously. If you have evidence of law enforcement corruption, time is critical. Can you meet in person? Could I? Should I?" I was about to respond when my phone rang again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize. Local area code. Against my better judgment, I answered. Margaret Thornton? A woman's voice, strained and urgent. Who is this? This is Hannah Bono. I was Helen's friend from college. She gave me your number as an emergency contact. Margaret, I'm so sorry to call you like this, but I need to tell you something. Helen came to my cabin 4 days ago. She was terrified, said she couldn't stay long, that it wasn't safe for me if she did. But she left something with me. Documents. She said if anything happened to her, I should give them to you. My heart pounded. Where are you? Madison. I can meet you somewhere public, somewhere safe. How do I know you're really Helen's friend? She told me you'd ask that. She said to tell you, Lighthouse, and that you'd understand. The word again. Helen's verification. There's a coffee shop on State Street, Hannah said. Near the university, Java Junction. Can you meet me there at 2 o'clock? I checked my watch. That gave me 4 hours to get back to Madison. Back toward my children, toward danger. I'll be there. Margaret? One more thing. Helen said if she disappeared, you should assume the worst. She said they'd come for anyone who knew too much. So be careful who you trust. Even family. Especially family, I said quietly. After we hung up, I sat motionless for a long moment. Then I cleared my browser history, logged out of the library computer, and walked back to my car through the cold October morning. I had 4 hours to drive to Madison, meet Hannah Bono, and collect whatever evidence Helen had left with her. Then I needed to decide, give everything to Agent Rodriguez immediately, or wait until I had all the pieces in place. Helen had spent 8 months building an airtight case. I'd had 3 days. But I had something Helen hadn't. I knew the people involved intimately. I knew their patterns, their weaknesses, their tells. And I was beginning to form a plan. The drive back to Madison felt longer than the drive north had been. Every car behind me looked suspicious. Every rest stop seemed dangerous. I kept the box of evidence locked in my trunk, Helen's journal in my purse, and my phone turned off. I couldn't afford to be tracked. Not now. Java Junction was crowded with students when I arrived at 1:45. I found a table in the back corner with a view of both entrances and ordered tea I didn't want. At exactly 2 o'clock, a young Asian woman in her 30s entered, scanning the room nervously. She wore a medical scrubs, a nurse or doctor, I guessed. When our eyes met, she hurried over. Margaret. Hannah, sit, please. She slid into the chair across from me, a manila envelope clutched in her hands. I'm so scared. I haven't heard from Helen since she left my cabin. The news is reporting her as a missing person, but they're saying she was mentally unstable. That's not true. Helen was the sanest person I knew. I believe you. The police came to my apartment yesterday, asked if I'd seen her. I lied and said no, but they seemed suspicious, like they knew I was lying. She pushed the envelope across the table. Helen said this was insurance. Backup copies of everything in case her primary evidence was compromised. She said you'd know what to do with it. I took the envelope, felt the weight of USB drives inside. Did she tell you what was on here? No. She said it was better if I didn't know. Safer. Hannah's eyes filled with tears. Do you think she's alive? I don't know. But I'm going to find out. And if she is alive, I'm going to make sure she stays that way. Hannah nodded, wiping her eyes. There's something else. Helen made me promise to tell you if we met. She said there's someone inside the operation who wants out. Someone who's been forced to participate but hates what they're doing. She wouldn't tell me who, but she said this person had contacted her, offered to testify if guarantees of protection could be made. An insider. Someone who could corroborate everything Helen had documented. Did she say anything else about this person? Only that they were family. That it was going to break your heart when you found out, but that they were genuinely remorseful. Hannah stood up, glancing nervously around the cafe. I have to go. I shouldn't stay here too long. But Margaret? Helen trusted you completely. She said you were the strongest woman she'd ever met. Don't let her down. She was gone before I could respond, disappearing into the crowd of students like she'd never been there. I sat holding the envelope, thinking about Hannah's words. Someone inside the operation who wanted out. Someone family. Could it be David? Had my son finally found his conscience? Or was it a trap? A way to draw me out? To learn what I knew and who I'd told? I couldn't know. Not yet. But I had to act. I opened my laptop, logged into the secure email account I'd created, and sent another message to Agent Rodriguez. I'm ready to meet. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Choose a location. Public, secure, with multiple exits. Send me the address. I'll have preliminary evidence with me. This is extensive, organized crime, multiple jurisdictions. Bring backup. This is bigger than you think. Concerned citizen. Her response came within minutes, listing an address, a federal building in Milwaukee, with specific instructions on which entrance to use and what identification I'd need. It was happening. Tomorrow I'd hand over everything to the FBI. Tomorrow the investigation would become official. But first I had one more thing to do. I drove to my bank in Madison, rented a safe deposit box, and secured copies of all the evidence inside. If anything happened to me, if I disappeared like Helen, the evidence would remain safe. Then I checked into a motel on the outskirts of town, paid cash, registered under a fake name. And finally, I turned on my phone. 17 missed calls, 23 text messages, all from David and Linda. The most recent text, from Linda, sent 10 minutes ago. Mom, you need to call us now. We know about the storage unit in Wausau. We know what you found. We need to talk before you do something you'll regret. This isn't what you think. Let us explain. If you go to the authorities with incomplete information, you'll destroy innocent people. Please, call me. They knew about Wausau, which meant they'd been tracking me somehow. My phone? My car? I turned the phone off immediately, pulled the battery out. Then I sat on the edge of the motel bed, shaking, as the full weight of the situation crashed down on me. My children knew I had the evidence. They knew I was preparing to expose them, and they were panicking, which made them more dangerous than ever. Tomorrow I'd go to the FBI. Tomorrow I'd hand over everything and let the authorities handle it. But tonight, I was alone in a motel room, with evidence that could destroy my entire family, hunted by my own children. And somewhere out there, Helen was either hiding or dead, having trusted me to finish what she'd started. I couldn't fail her. I wouldn't. Even if it meant losing everything I had left. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound in the motel, ice machines, doors slamming, voices in adjacent rooms, sent adrenaline spiking through my system. At 3 a.m., I gave up pretending and sat at the small desk, organizing the evidence one final time. 3 USB drives with Helen's original documentation. 6 more from the Wausau storage unit. Hannah's backup copies. Printed financial records. The journal. Photographs. Audio recordings that would destroy my children's lives. I had enough to put them in prison for decades. The thought should have brought satisfaction. Justice being served. Criminals facing consequences. Instead, it felt like I was preparing to kill them myself. A slower legal execution, but an execution nonetheless. At 5 a.m., my phone, battery still removed, buzzed with a notification that made my heart stop. No, that was impossible. The phone was off. Then I realized it wasn't my phone. It was the prepaid burner I'd bought yesterday at a gas station, tucked into my purse as insurance. A phone my children didn't know existed. One text message from a blocked number. Don't go to FBI. It's a trap. They're waiting for you. Meet me instead. I'll explain everything. Parking garage, level 3, corner of Murray and Johnson, 8 a.m. Come alone. Someone who cares about you. My hands trembled holding the phone. A trap? Or was this message itself the trap? But something about the phrasing nagged at me. Someone who cares about you. Not someone who wants to help, or a friend. Someone who cares. Hannah had mentioned an insider. Someone family who wanted out. Could this be them? I sat in the pre-dawn darkness, weighing impossible choices. Go to the FBI at 10 a.m. as planned. But if the message was genuine, walk into whatever trap my children had set. Or meet this mysterious person at 8 a.m. and possibly walk into a different trap. At 6 a.m. I made my decision. I would go to the parking garage, but I wouldn't go unprepared. I spent an hour setting up insurance. I uploaded copies of the most damning evidence to a cloud storage account accessible with a password only I knew. Then I composed a detailed email to Agent Rodriguez, explaining everything: the operation, the evidence, the locations, the names. I scheduled it to send automatically at 11 a.m. If I didn't cancel that scheduled email by 10:45, Rodriguez would receive everything even if I disappeared. Then I wrote 3 physical letters: to Agent Rodriguez, to Hannah Bono, and to Carol, my old teaching colleague. Each contained different pieces of information, different instructions. I sealed them, addressed them, and left them with the motel's front desk clerk with instructions to mail them if I didn't return by noon. Finally, I took half the evidence with me and left half hidden in the motel room's air conditioning vent. If someone found me, captured me, took my bag, they'd only get half the story. At 7:30 a.m., I drove to the parking garage. The structure was mostly empty this early. My footsteps echoed on the concrete as I climbed to level 3. The corner spot was vacant except for a single car, a silver sedan I didn't recognize. I parked 2 spaces away, positioned so I could see the exits, and waited. At exactly 8 a.m., a figure emerged from the sedan. Dennis. My son-in-law stepped into the gray morning light, and I felt something between my ribs crack. Not David. Not Linda. Dennis. Quiet, methodical Dennis, who'd been part of my family for 15 years. He approached slowly, hands visible. Empty. "Margaret, thank you for coming." "Why should I trust you?" I stayed in my car, door locked, engine running. "You shouldn't. I wouldn't if I were you." He stopped 10 feet away. "But I'm the one who contacted Helen 6 weeks ago. I'm the insider she mentioned in her journal." "Prove it." He pulled out his phone, showed me the screen. Text messages between him and a number I recognized. Helen's. "Dennis, I can't do this anymore. The drugs, the people getting hurt. This wasn't what I signed up for." Helen. "Then help me stop it. Testify. Be brave." Dennis. "I have daughters. If these people think I've betrayed them..." Helen. "Then we protect your daughters. But we have to act." I read the messages, dated early September, before Helen had come to me with the USB drive. "Get in," I said, unlocking the passenger door. Dennis slid into the seat beside me, and I saw how much he'd aged in the past few months. Gray at his temples that hadn't been there at Christmas. Lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered. "Why now?" I asked. "Why contact me?" "Because Linda and David are planning something. Something that will hurt you." His voice cracked. "I love my wife, Margaret. I do. But she's not the person I married. Or maybe she always was, and I just didn't see it. This operation, it changed her. Or revealed her. I don't know anymore. What are they planning? They know you have Helen's evidence. They've been tracking your phone, your credit cards. They know about Wowsow, about the storage unit, about Hannah Bono." He turned to face me. "They also know about your meeting with Agent Rodriguez." My blood ran cold. "How?" "Rodriguez isn't FBI. I mean, she is, but she's also on the payroll. She's been feeding information to the operation for 2 years. When you contacted her, she immediately alerted David. They've been reading every email you sent." The room tilted. I'd been so careful, so smart. And I'd walked straight into exactly what Helen had warned me about. Corrupted law enforcement. "The meeting this morning was a setup," Dennis continued. "You walk into that federal building, you don't walk out. They'll detain you on some fabricated charge, confiscate the evidence, and then..." He didn't finish the sentence. "And then I disappear like Helen." Yes. I sat gripping the steering wheel, trying to breathe normally. "Is Helen alive?" Dennis's face crumpled. "I don't know. I swear to you, Margaret, I don't know. David won't tell me. Linda won't tell me. I think..." His voice broke. "I think she's dead. I think David did something he can't take back. And I think that's when this whole thing became something none of us can escape from." Silence filled the car, heavy with horror. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked finally. "Why betray them?" "Because I have daughters." He said it simply, with devastating clarity. "Hannah and Sophie. They're 10 and 8. And I won't, Let them grow up thinking their father was a good man when I'm not. I won't let them inherit my sins." He wiped his eyes. Helen was right. Sometimes being brave means losing everything, but at least you lose it with your soul intact. "What do you want me to do?" "Run. Take the evidence and run. Not to Rodriguez, to someone clean. There's a U.S. attorney in Chicago, Walter Webb. He's built his career on corruption cases. He's ambitious, hungry, and most importantly, he's not from Wisconsin. No local connections to compromise. Contact him. Give him everything. And you? I'll testify. I'll tell them everything I know. The routes, the contacts, the money trails. I've kept my own records. Insurance, I told myself. But really, it was conscience. I couldn't participate without documenting. Couldn't let it all disappear into darkness. He pulled out another USB drive. "This is my copy. Everything from my perspective. The financial side of the operation. It corroborates everything Helen documented." I took the drive, added it to my collection. "What about Linda, your daughters?" Pain crossed his face. "Linda made her choice. She's known for weeks that I was pulling away, questioning things. She chose David over me, the operation over our family. As for Hannah and Sophie," he swallowed hard, "I'm going to lose them. When this comes out, when Linda goes to prison, they'll hate me. They'll think I destroyed their mother. But maybe someday when they're older they'll understand. Maybe they'll even be proud that their father did the right thing, even when it cost him everything." I reached across, squeezed his hand. "They will. I promise you. They will. Margaret, you need to leave now. David and Linda are probably already looking for you. They'll check motels, friends' houses, anywhere you might hide. You can't go back to your farm. I know. And you can't trust anyone local. The operation has reach, police, officials, people in positions you'd never suspect. Helen was right about that. What will you do?" "I'm taking the girls to Linda's mother in Minnesota this morning. Told Linda it's just a visit, that they're on fall break. Then I'm driving to Chicago myself. Turning myself into Webb's office, asking for protection in exchange for testimony." He opened the door, paused. "Margaret, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I was part of this. That I let it happen. That I helped them use you. You're trying to make it right now. That's what matters." After he left, I sat alone in my car and allowed myself exactly 2 minutes of grief. Grief for my daughter-in-law, who might be dead. Grief for my son, who might have killed her. Grief for my daughter, who'd chosen crime over family. Grief for the life I'd thought I had, which had never existed at all. Then I wiped my eyes, started the engine, and drove. Not to Chicago. Not yet. First, I was going back to my farm. There was something I needed. Something Helen had mentioned in her journal that I'd initially overlooked. She'd written about finding the operation's main ledger, the master record that tracked everything. She'd photographed pages from it but hadn't been able to get the original. That ledger would be definitive proof, unalterable, physical evidence that couldn't be dismissed as digital manipulation. And I knew where it would be. In the barn, in that hidden storage room, in the filing cabinet I'd found. Bottom drawer, the one I hadn't fully searched because David had arrived. It was dangerous. Stupid even. My children would expect me to run, to hide, to go straight to authorities. They wouldn't expect me to walk back into their trap, which meant it was exactly what I needed to do. I arrived at the farm at 9:30 a.m. The house looked empty, peaceful in the late October morning. David's truck wasn't there. Neither was Linda's car. But that didn't mean they weren't inside, waiting. I parked at the edge of the property, hidden by trees, and approached on foot. The barn door was unlocked. Careless of them or intentional. An invitation. Inside, everything looked the same. The stacked boxes, the old equipment, the carefully maintained appearance of neglect and disuse. I moved the boxes aside, opened the hidden door I'd previously forced, stepped into the storage room. The filing cabinet stood in the corner, exactly as before. I opened the bottom drawer. Empty. Of course. They'd cleared it out. Everything gone. Looking for this? I spun around. Linda stood in the doorway, holding a thick leather ledger. Behind her, David. Both of them blocking my exit. "Mom?" Linda's voice was soft, almost sad. You should have stayed away. You murdered Helen. I said it calmly, stating fact. David flinched. It wasn't murder. It was an accident. She tried to run and... He stopped, shook his head. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. But it did happen. And now you're in so deep you can't get out. I looked at my daughter. Is that ledger worth it, Linda? Worth killing for? Worth destroying your own mother? We're not going to hurt you. Linda stepped forward. We just need the evidence. All of it. Everything Helen gave you. Everything you found. You give it to us. We'll let you live quietly on this farm for the rest of your life. You'll be comfortable. Safe. A prisoner in my own home. A mother who protects her children, Linda corrected. Isn't that what you've always done? Protected us? This is just one more time. I looked at my children. Really looked at them. Saw the desperation beneath the threat. The fear. They were trapped in their own operation, owned by people more dangerous than themselves, willing to do anything to survive. I can't give you the evidence, I said quietly. Mom, David started. Because I already sent it. I smiled. To the U.S. Attorney in Chicago, to the FBI in Washington, to 3 different journalists. It's uploading to public servers as we speak. In 20 minutes, everyone will know everything, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. I was lying, but they didn't know that. Linda's face went white. You're bluffing. Am I? Check your email. You'll find a message from me. Time-stamped an hour ago. Copies to 16 different recipients. David pulled out his phone, fingers shaking. Linda, She really... Call it off, Linda demanded. Whatever you've done, undo it. Now. I can't. Once it's sent, it's sent. It's over, Linda, for all of us. Then you've killed us. My daughter's voice was flat, dead. You've killed your own children. No. You killed yourselves the moment you decided to use my home for your crimes. The moment you dragged me into this without my knowledge. The moment you murdered Helen. I straightened my shoulders. I'm 64 years old. I've lived a good life. If I go to prison for harboring criminals on my property, so be it. But I won't let you continue hurting people. I won't let you use me as your shield anymore. David moved toward me. Mom, please. There has to be another way. There isn't. It's done. For a long moment, we stood in that hidden room. Mother and children, family and enemies, and I saw the exact instant they accepted defeat. Linda dropped the ledger. It hit the floor with a heavy thud. Then I guess we all go down together, she said. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Not the local sheriff. These were different, FBI, U.S. Marshals, federal agents who'd received the evidence I'd actually uploaded from the parking garage an hour ago, while Dennis distracted his wife, and my son searched motels for me. You're wrong about one thing, I told my children as the sirens grew deafening. You don't all go down. Dennis is testifying against you. He's been cooperating for weeks, and he's going to help put you away for a very long time. The look of betrayal on Linda's face would have been satisfying if it wasn't so devastating. Federal agents swarmed the barn, weapons drawn, shouting commands. My children were pushed to the ground, handcuffed, read their rights. I stood in the corner, hands raised. An old woman in her own barn, watching her family's destruction unfold exactly as she'd orchestrated it. An agent approached me, not Rodriguez, someone I didn't recognize. Margaret Thornton? Yes. I'm Agent Bono, FBI. We need you to come with us. You're not under arrest, but we have questions. I understand. As they led me out of the barn, I looked back once. David and Linda in handcuffs being loaded into separate vehicles, both staring at me with expressions I couldn't read. Hatred? Heartbreak? Some terrible combination of both? I turned away. Outside, the November morning was cold and clear. My farm spread around me. The house where I'd raised my children. The fields Bill had tended. The life we'd built from nothing. It was tainted now, poisoned by what had happened here. But it was still mine. And I was still free. The federal building in Milwaukee became my second home for the next 3 weeks. Interview after interview, deposition after deposition, walking prosecutors through every piece of evidence Helen had collected, and I had preserved. Agent Walter Bono, no relation to Hannah, he assured me with a tired smile, led the investigation with the kind of methodical precision that reminded me of grading term papers. Every detail mattered. Every inconsistency needed explanation. They found Helen's body on November 8th. She'd been buried in a wooded area 40 miles from my farm, wrapped in a tarp that Dennis later testified David had purchased with cash 3 days after Helen disappeared. The medical examiner ruled it blunt force trauma to the head, consistent with David's eventual confession that she'd tried to run when he'd confronted her at a gas station, and he'd panicked, pushed her, watched her fall, and strike her head on concrete. An accident, he maintained. He'd been trying to talk to her, to convince her to stop investigating, and it had all gone wrong. But he'd buried the body, hidden it. Let me believe she might still be alive while he and Linda worked to discredit her, to paint her as mentally unstable, to erase the truth she'd died protecting. That wasn't an accident. That was calculation. I attended Helen's funeral on a cold Tuesday in mid-November. Her parents had flown in from Arizona, bewildered and broken, trying to understand how their daughter had ended up murdered by her own husband. I sat in the back of the church, watching them grieve, and carried the weight of knowing I'd failed to save her. Hannah Bono, Helen's friend, not the agent, found me afterward in the parking lot. She trusted you, Hannah said, her eyes red from crying. She said you'd finish what she started, and you did. Not soon enough to save her. No one could have saved her. Not once David made his choice. Hannah handed me a small box. I found this in Helen's things at my cabin. She wanted you to have it if anything happened. Inside was a photograph. Helen and David on their wedding day, young and smiling and in love. On the back, Helen had written, "Remember that people can be two things at once. Who they were and who they became. Remember the good while fighting the bad. S." I kept that photograph. Put it in the box with Bill's letters, with the USB drives that had changed everything, with the evidence of my family's destruction. Because Helen was right. David had been a good boy once. Linda had been a bright, caring daughter. They'd become something else, something criminal and dangerous. But the people they'd been deserved to be remembered too, even if I could never forgive what they'd become. The federal prosecution moved with surprising speed. Dennis's testimony provided the framework. Helen's evidence provided the proof. And the ledger Linda had been holding when the agents arrived, the one she'd dropped in shock, tied everything together with the kind of detail only an accountant could have maintained. By December, 23 people had been arrested. The operation had been larger than even Helen had documented, reaching into 3 states, involving 2 other law enforcement officers besides Sheriff Hendricks, and moving millions of dollars through channels so complex it took forensic accountants weeks to untangle them. David and Linda were charged with conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, money laundering, obstruction of justice, and, in David's case, second-degree murder. Dennis, in exchange for his cooperation and testimony, received immunity from prosecution. He'd lost everything: his marriage, his career, his home, but he'd kept his freedom and his soul. I visited him once in January at the small apartment he'd rented near his daughters. "How are Hannah and Sophie?" I asked over coffee that neither of us drank. "Confused, angry. They don't understand why Mommy is in prison and Daddy isn't, when Daddy says he did bad things too." His hands shook around his cup. "Linda's lawyer is telling them I'm a traitor, that I destroyed their family. Maybe she's right. You did the right thing. They'll understand that eventually." "Will they?" He looked at me with hollow eyes. "Margaret, I wake up every morning and have to look at my daughters and know that I'm the reason their mother is gone, that I'm the reason their lives are destroyed. How do I live with that? The same way I do." I reached across the table, covered his hand with mine. One day at a time, knowing that the alternative was worse, that if we'd stayed silent, more people would have been hurt, more families destroyed. Does that actually help? Knowing you did the right thing? I considered the question honestly. No, not really. But it helps me sleep at night. And some days that's enough. After I left Dennis, I drove to the prison where Linda was being held pending trial. She'd refused to see me 4 times. But this time, perhaps out of boredom or curiosity or some flicker of the relationship we'd once had, she agreed. They brought her out in an orange jumpsuit, her hair pulled back without style, her face bare of makeup. She looked younger somehow, or older. I couldn't decide which. We sat across from each other, a scratched plexiglass barrier between us, phones connecting our voices. Mom. Her voice was flat, emotionless. Linda. Did you come to gloat? I came to ask if you needed anything. Books. Money for your commissary account. Anything. She laughed, a harsh, broken sound. What I need is for you to go back in time and mind your own business. To let us handle Helen. To stay out of it. Helen was murdered. Helen was a problem that needed solving. David solved it badly. But the problem would have been solved one way or another. Linda leaned forward. You want to know the truth, Mom? The truth is that we were making money. Real money. Enough to retire young, to give our kids every advantage, to never worry about anything. And yes, some people got hurt, some people got addicted, some people died, but people die every day. That's not our fault. We didn't force anyone to buy drugs. I listened to my daughter, my beautiful, intelligent daughter, justify murder and destruction with the cold logic of a sociopath, and I realized something I'd been avoiding for months. I didn't know her at all. Maybe I never had. I'm sorry I failed you, I said quietly. That cracked her composure. You didn't fail me. You betrayed me. There's a difference. No, I failed you. Somewhere, somehow, I raised you to believe that money was more important than people, that ends justified means, that you were special enough to be above consequences. I stood up, preparing to leave. That failure is mine to carry. But the choices you made, those are yours. I'll never forgive you. Linda's voice was cold, final. I know. I don't forgive me either. I walked away from my daughter, out of the prison, into the January cold, and felt something break loose inside my chest. Not healing, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of acceptance. David's trial came first in February. I attended every day, sitting behind the prosecution, watching my son face the consequences of his actions. His defense argued that Helen's death had been accidental, that David was a good man who'd made terrible choices under pressure from people more powerful than himself, that he deserved mercy. The prosecution presented Helen's evidence, her recordings, her journal entries, the testimony of people who'd known her, who described a loving, rational woman with no history of mental illness or instability. They showed how David and Linda had systematically worked to discredit her, to paint her as paranoid and dangerous. And then they showed the video footage Helen had captured, David loading boxes of opioids into his truck, knowing exactly what they contained, where they were going, what they would do. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing was set for April. David faced 25 years to life. As they led him away, he looked back at me. Our eyes met across the courtroom, and I saw my little boy, the child who'd cried when his pet hamster died, who'd brought me dandelions from the yard, who'd held my hand at his father's funeral. I saw him, and I mourned him, and I let him go. Linda's trial followed in March. She chose not to testify, let her lawyers argue that she'd been manipulated by David, that she'd been a minor player who'd gotten in over her head. But the evidence showed otherwise. Showed her as the organizer, the planner, the one who'd first proposed using my farm, who'd forged my signature on documents, who'd maintained the books and records that Dennis eventually turned over. The jury found her guilty in less than 4 hours. She received 20 years. At her sentencing, the judge asked if she had anything to say. Linda stood, looked directly at me in the gallery, and said, I have nothing to say to this court, but I want my mother to know that I hate her, that I will hate her until the day I die, that she destroyed this family for a woman who wasn't even blood, and that I hope she lives long enough to regret what she's done. The judge banged his gavel. The defendant will refrain from addressing the gallery. But the words had been said. They hung in the air like poison, and I breathed them in, let them settle into my bones. Because Linda was right about one thing. I would live with this forever. Sheriff Hendricks pleaded guilty to corruption charges in a separate trial. 10 years. Agent Rodriguez, the FBI agent who'd been feeding information to the operation, received 15. By the time spring arrived, it was over. The trial's complete, the sentences handed down, the operation dismantled completely, and I was alone. Not entirely alone. Hannah Bono called me weekly, checking in, making sure I was eating, sleeping, surviving. Dennis brought his daughters to visit once a month. Awkward visits where my granddaughters looked at me with confused suspicion, trying to understand why Grandma Margaret had hurt their mother. I didn't try to explain. How could I make two young girls understand that sometimes love means holding people accountable? That protecting them meant exposing the truth, even when that truth destroyed everything? They'd understand someday. Or they wouldn't. Either way, I'd done what needed to be done. In May, I stood in my barn with a contractor discussing demolition. "You sure you want to tear it down?" he asked. "Structure's still sound. Could be renovated, turned into something useful." "I'm sure. Tear it down. All of it. I want it gone." He nodded. Didn't ask why. Maybe he'd read the news stories, knew what had happened here. Or maybe he just recognized the tone of a woman who needed to erase a memory. They demolished the barn in 3 days. It took 30 years to build and 3 days to reduce to rubble. I stood watching the walls come down, the roof collapse, the secret storage room crushed under heavy machinery. With it went the last physical evidence of what my children had done, what had been hidden here while I'd lived my life in innocent ignorance. When it was gone, I planted grass seed over the empty space. In a few months, there'd be nothing but lawn. Nothing to show there had ever been a barn at all. People can't erase the past, but they can choose what grows from it. By June, I'd settled into a new routine. Mornings in my garden, afternoons working with a victims advocacy group that Hannah had connected me with. I spoke at support groups sometimes. Families torn apart by addiction, by crime, by secrets that destroyed everything. I told them my story. Not for sympathy, but for understanding. To help them see that they weren't alone in their grief, their anger, their complicated love for people who'd hurt them. And slowly, painfully, I began to heal. One evening in late July, I sat on my porch watching the sunset paint the sky orange and gold. The space where the barn had been was covered in new grass now, thick and green, as if nothing had ever stood there. My phone buzzed. A text from Dennis. Hannah and Sophie asked if they could visit this weekend. Stay the night. They're starting to ask questions about what really happened. I think they're ready to understand. Are you? I looked at the sunset, at the farm that had been both sanctuary and crime scene, at the life I'd rebuilt from ruins. Was I ready? Maybe. Maybe not. But ready or not, the truth had a way of arriving when it needed to. I typed back, "Yes, bring them. We'll talk." Because that's what families do. We talk. We tell hard truths. We face what we've done and who we've become. And sometimes, if we're lucky, we find ways to forgive. Not the crimes, never the crimes, but the people we loved before they committed them. I'm 74 years old now as I write this. 10 years have passed since that October day when Helen arrived at my door with a USB drive and a warning. 10 years since my life divided into before and after. David will be eligible for parole in 15 years. Linda in 10. I don't know if I'll go to those hearings. If I'll speak for or against their release. If I'll have anything left to say to them at all. But I know this. I did the right thing. The hard thing. The thing that cost me my children but saved my soul. Helen's parents and I have become close. We have lunch once a month. Share memories of the daughter and daughter-in-law who deserved better than she got. They've told me they don't blame me for what happened. I blame me enough for both of us. But I survive. I endure. I tend my garden and help other families navigate their own betrayals and losses. And on quiet evenings, I sit on my porch and look at the space where the barn used to be, and I remember everything. The secrets, the lies, the moment I decided to stand for truth instead of family. Some people would say I chose wrong. That family should come first, always. That a mother's job is to protect her children, no matter what they've done. But I know better now. A mother's job is to teach her children right from wrong, to hold them accountable when they fail, to love them enough to let them face consequences. I did that. Finally, terribly, I did exactly what a mother should do. And I'll live with that choice, with all its pain and necessity, until the day I die. The sunset fades, the new grass grows, the house stands empty except for me, and I am still here, still standing, still free. That, in the end, is victory enough. Now tell me, what would you have done if you were in my place? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out the video on your screen right now. I'm sure it will surprise you.